Hi there, my name's Mike Phillips, and I hope to show you in this video a couple of tricks that will help you remove the edge artifacts that might plague your planetary imaging, especially on Mars this season. Let's start with a recent image I took, softly processed, shows a nice edge limb to it, and not a whole lot of detail. When we sharpen that image, the same image here, sharpened, shows a fair amount of detail, maybe a little bit too much, too grainy. It's an oversampled image, so it's okay, but it does show a lot of limb ringing and a lot of limb artifacts. So I'm going to teach you a couple of tricks that I use in Gimp, using layers and using opacity and a few other little selection techniques that hopefully will yield you a much more balanced image that you see here on the right. So how are we going to do that? Well, first let's take a look at the original soft image here. And this is slightly processed, and I'll produce some details on this later. But for purposes of teaching you how to use layers, let's create a new layer here. And we're going to call this one black, because we're going to use this one as a reference point to set against the bottom of the image so that we can see where things are and where things aren't. So the black is going to be set by this color here. So we'll say foreground color, and we'll say OK, and it disappeared. So why don't we grab that one and set it to the bottom? So as we grab the layers, you can drag and drop them into different locations. So the topmost is the most viewable and the bottommost is the least viewable, and you'll see how the opacity changes that. So right now the black becomes essentially invisible. So we turn the background layer on and off, and you can see nothing but the black. Next layer we're going to choose via layer new here is going to be our sharpened version. Now we're going to set that one to transparent, and the reason we're going to do that is because you'll remove the edge artifact by selecting and cutting. So we'll set that one on top, and essentially to demonstrate how this works, the top layer here is completely transparent, which means you can see whatever's underneath it. Okay, so we'll go ahead and turn those back on, and let's go back to our over sharpened image here. So what we're going to do is select everything. So select all, edit, copy, and we go over here to our soft version, select the sharpened layer here, and then say edit, paste. Now what Gimp does, and I'm not sure if Photoshop does this, it creates it as kind of a floating layer until we anchor it, and then we go ahead and select layer anchor, and that essentially drops it and fixes it into the layer that we created and named called sharpened. Now here's where the opacity comes into play, and this is in and of itself a pretty cool trick. So you can turn this layer on and off, and it basically makes that layer disappear, and you see what's underneath it. You turn it on and you see the layer on top of it. But if you grab the opacity setting here and drag it slowly down, what you see is a blend of the two images above and the current selected one. So as you move it up and down, you'll find maybe a sweet spot where you think you got enough detail and enough softening that you're happy with it. Maybe here around 50% or so. So that looks pretty good, right? But we still have this limb artifact here. So how do we get rid of that? So let's go ahead and turn the opacity level all the way up. We're going to deselect the background layer. So, and this allows us to essentially see the sharpened layer against the black. But what we're going to do is select this elliptical tool, this elliptical selection tool now here. Now what this does is it creates a little circle like this, and that's how we're going to highlight the area that we want to keep. But a couple of non-default settings that you might want to tool around with, and something to play with here, are the feather edges. So essentially this creates a diffuse border around the edge. The default is the edge selection is on, and then anything beyond it is off. Okay, but a feather means anything between 30 pixels, between the edge and 30 pixels out, it becomes a little more broad and diffuse, and it's a little softer along the edge. And then the other thing that helps me is to create a fixed aspect ratio of, we'll say 1:1. Okay, now that just essentially turns it into a circle selection tool instead of an elliptical selection tool. So you basically drag and drop, and it creates a circle of some determined size here like this. And once you've done that, you can move it by grabbing the center. So I'm going to drop the top around the edge of the top of the disk here, and then I'm going to grab one of the corners or one of the bottom points here and just give it about the right shape and size, and you'll have to tool around with that a little bit. So this is the Sharpen. Make sure you're on the Sharpen layer here. And now what we want to do is actually to invert the selection, and the reason we're doing that is because we wanted to delete by saying edit clear. We're deleting the bad part here, and it's kind of hard to tell with the selection tool still on, so we'll say select none. But what we've done is we've taken that sharpened image and we've removed all the bad parts around the edge. And that's okay because we're going to use the soft layer underneath. So let's go ahead and turn both on at the same time. And it looks a little funny initially. So we're going to go ahead and do that same opacity selection tool here. And what you see is the softened image all the way with opacity 0 on the sharpened layer. And as we move it up, highlighting more of the sharpened layer, you'll see that the ring is mostly absent, and that's because we deleted it from the sharpened layer. So again, we're going to find that sort of sweet spot. Now, the last thing I want to show you is to change the mode of blending. Essentially, if we set this to, let's say, 50% here, the mode of blending now is just normal, but if we set it to something like soft, it actually turns quite nice here. And that's what I have all the way on the right over here. So the final thing to do maybe is to play around with some other opacity and different mode settings here, and as you drag this up and down, what you're going to notice now is differing settings here that hopefully give you the right balance that what you're looking for. And I do believe that having a side-by-side comparison like this helps a lot, but I think it even helps more when you take the opacity between a sharp and a soft processed versions and kind of compare them dynamically to kind of slide between the two using the opacity. I hope this tool taught you a little bit about layers and a little bit about opacity, and the selection tools help remove the edge artifact. And if you have any other settings or comments that might help others, please feel free to leave it. And as always, I hope you have a great day and clear skies.